Hi there, it's Dr. Gianna Reames, and we're going to continue to talk today about Hephaestion, and eventually I'll get around to Krateros too, and their role at the court of Alexander. Today I want to tackle what's been a bee in my bonnet for a while. I've been studying Hephaestion's career for 30 plus years at this point. And I often find in particularly pop history renditions of them, of Alexander et al., that Hephaestion ends up getting reduced to Alexander's arm candy, his sounding board. Now, the sounding board part of it is a little bit more accurate to what the sources tell us, but he is not typically presented as one of the chief officers, one of the most powerful men at Alexander's court. And his rivals particularly on screen, but also sometimes in print, are the women at the court, or Bagoas, the Alexander's eunuch, not Krateros. I don't think I've ever seen in a documentary or especially film um, a depiction of Krateros and Hephaestion at loggerheads, and you're really missing something because that's a story, not any putative fights with Roxana or Statira or whomever. So, kind of to show you what I mean, you get stuff along the lines of this from Oliver Stone's Alexander, where Hephaestion is there in the background, literally in the background, leaning over the couch in eyeliner and slinky silk, reading letters over Alexander's shoulder, which there's actually a story of that. But he's not really being presented in this film in a in as powerful a way as his actual role. Okay. And again, we are shown his rivals, Roxana, Bagoas, not Krateros. Okay. Or in the more recent Netflix, they finally show them. Oliver Stone hints at the fact that they're lovers. Netflix just comes out and shows it to you. Okay. But later we see Alexander kind of leaving Hephaestion in favor of Statira, and there's this implication of jealousy on the part of Hephaestion. Um, no. Okay, no. And not the lovers part of it. That is not the issue here. Okay. The issue is not understanding what to do with this guy. Okay. And his position at the court and his importance at the court. Yes, he is Alexander's best friend, almost certainly his lover, certainly when they were boys. But he is also a general. At the end of his life, the end of Alexander's life, he's chilliarch. That's the number two guy. Okay. And again, his chief rivals are the other marshals. They're not Alexander's wives or putative boyfriends or whatever. That really misunderstands how the Greeks constructed these relationships, for one thing, but also Hephaestion's role and his competence. And that's really what winds up being called into question. Okay. And I see it even in history books. And part of why I got interested in Hephaestion was this sense or presentation of him as being tall, handsome, spoilt, spiteful, and fundamentally stupid, to quote Peter Green. And Peter was a dear, but I disagree with him on that. And so I set about a kind of a systematic evaluation of Hephaestion's military career. Okay. And that was the subject of my dissertation, his role in Alexander's life, yes, and at the court, but specifically at the court, and his importance, and the fact that he earned it. It wasn't just handed to him because he grew up with the prince or he was Alexander's lover. Okay, no. One of the things that we have to be when we do history is very systematic in our evaluation of the sources. Jean Borza taught me you start with the evidence. You don't start with your theory and then go hunting for the evidence to back it up. That's not how history works, or it's not how it should work. You start with the evidence and then you see where it takes you. And so, what I did as part of the dissertation and then later republished as The Cult of Hephaestion, an article, was to look at his career systematically for content analysis. Okay, and that was the tool being used. And in print, I produced these tables, okay, of his assignments. I went through the sources systematically, pulled out all of the assignments and mentions, okay, and then looked at them and how they functioned, okay, how he functioned at Alexander's court. And there are 32 entries into this table. I'm not going to show them to you, all of them. You could go look at them in the article if you like. And this is earlier work. Now, in what I'm doing right now, I'm going to do some rearranging of where some of this falls. But the fundamental arguments and points don't really change. It's more a matter of nitpicking some of the details. And I'm going to do some other things with it as well. But looking at these, you have to be, again, systematic. What does our evidence tell us? Okay. And as I was arranging these and I was working with it back in the days before lots of spreadsheets and things, I was using 3x5 cards. Well, this wound up being very fortuitous because I was arranging the cards in different stacks, looking at, okay, if I want to look at the mentions of him this way, what does that look like? And when I got to looking at logistics and diplomatic assignments versus everything else, it was really lopsided. Okay. Now, in ancient armies, they didn't specialize nearly to the degree that modern armies do. So that was weird. Okay. If you were looking at somebody else, Krateros, which I'm now looking at, you don't see that. Yeah, there's some logistics, there's combat, there's diplomatic things, and it's a lot more even. But with Hephaestion, it wasn't. And of 32 entries that are in this table, finally, three of them are commissions. That is, being given a position as either like co-commander of the companion cavalry, or his position as chilliarch, right? So three we can take away. That leaves us with 29 assignments, mentions of assignments. And when you start looking at these, okay, 20 of them were non-combat or very minor combat situations. They were logistical, and you can see across the top here the description: diplomatic advisory, building, founding cities, troop supply, troop movement, all of that is logistics and diplomatics. 20 of them were of that type. Only 5 were purely combat. One of those may be a duplicate, so maybe only 4. Another 4 were a mix of combat and logistical. To give an example of this, the bridging of the Indus River, okay, both Hephaestion and Perdiccas were put on assignment together. And when you read Arrian, it becomes obvious that they're each kind of doing different things. So yes, they are co-assigned, and yes, that did involve some combat. And yes, Hephaestion was probably involved in the combat. But when Arrian talks about the bridge itself, in one place he basically calls it Hephaestion's bridge. Perdiccas isn't even mentioned. Okay. So what we are seeing is enough difference, enough imbalance, if you will, in what these assignments were to say, huh. It looks like he is getting assigned as, particularly toward the end of his life, as Alexander's chief diplomatic and logistical officer after Alexander himself. Okay. Certainly after the death of Parmenion, he steps forward, and that is his role at the court. And other people do logistics as well, including Krateros and including Perdiccas, and there's several others that are mentioned, that I'll talk about when I get around to the book, the monograph on these guys. And Hephaestion is doing things as well. In many points, he's in charge of the whole army. practically, while Alexander's off doing stuff. So he certainly has these command positions that may not always involve combat, but are very important commands. That it's telling us a story, and he's good at it. These are not unsuccessful. In fact, they're very successful in several cases, like bridging the Indus, which was quite a puzzle, and he figured it out. So this is how he is being used at the court. And what this tells us is he's probably pretty good at organization. And that in turn then probably leads to him being given the role of the chilliarch later. Okay. And just to give you a sense of kind of where current research is, okay, not our lovely charts, but this is kind of where I am right now. Gives you an idea of what historians do for fun in our spare time. And then the whole thing. This is every single mention of Krateros and Hephaestion in the ancient sources. So when I'm talking about being systematic, this is what I mean. Okay. And this time I'm not just listing them, I'm separating them out across sources because that tells another story as well. So in thinking about Hephaestion's role at the court, and as I said, this is something he earned. It wasn't a gift. He rises across time, okay, as does Krateros, as do several other figures. He doesn't start out there because he's young, all right? Of Alexander's centrophoi, so what is a centrophoi? That's a companion of the prince. They grew up with Alexander. Of his centrophoi, really only Perdiccas gets fairly important assignments early on, and that probably has more to do with Perdiccas's role as a royal. He was a son of Orontes, who appears to have been the prince of a canton called Orestes. So no, he's not on Alexander's rank, but he's way above some of the other centrophoi like Hephaestion. So yes, birth gets you assignments, not just ability. But as time went on with Alexander, increasingly we see him favoring competence after the Battle of Gaugamela. So once he is kind of definitively won as king, Darius is still alive and he has to go chase him down. But after that, he kind of starts rearranging the army, not unlike what his father had done before, and starts giving people appointments based on skill, based on command, not always on birth. Okay. Top commands, a lot of them are still going based on birth, but you see Alexander leaning into competence as a measuring stick. Whatever else we may think about Alexander running off to, take over the world, he was successful. He was wildly successful. Just unbelievable at what he managed to do in a relatively short amount of time. Okay. You don't get there unless you are good, unless you appoint competent people to do jobs and then get out of their way and let them do it. Okay. There still is this persistent notion of Alexander just being lucky, and he had Philip's army and he had luck and he went out and he conquered the world. No, 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 no. That might work for a little while, but it's not gonna work across 10 years. And so there's some real skill involved here, and in Alexander choosing people who are good at what they do, and then, like I said, getting out of their way and letting them do it. Hephaestion was one of those people. Okay. He did not get his assignments because Alexander loved him. Okay. Either platonically or romantically, that's irrelevant. He got his assignments because he was good at details, apparently. That's what our sources are telling us. That's what the evidence is telling us. Okay. So Hephaestion rises to the second guy in the empire after Alexander himself, based on skill. Okay. And I'm not the only one who said that. Sabina Mueller has also made that argument as well. Again, this was the subject of my dissertation, taking this on, and then I'm working again now on both Krateros and Hephaestion at the court, as I'm interested in courts and how they work, and court studies. So I'm looking at both of their careers and dealing with their careers. So I think this is critical in looking at Hephaestion in history is give him his due. His rivals are men like Krateros or Eumenes, or before that perhaps Philotas. That they're not Alexander's girlfriends, wives, boyfriends, etc. He is a general, and he's good at it. Okay. So maybe going forward, we'll talk a little bit more about Hephaestion's assignments, okay, and what might have been involved with being chilliarch. Some of this I don't want to go into a lot of detail because I'm writing a book on it, so I'll put that in the book. But I did want to address the so-called pink elephant in the room that figure out what to do with this guy, narrators. Okay. Give him jobs, actual assignments and jobs that demonstrate his real role at Alexander's court. I will end by saying this, that there is some precedent, perhaps, for this focus. And it has to do with how Hephaestion has come down to us in the sources. So again, we got to go look at the sources. And one of the things of note, particularly with the later Roman writers. Now, not so much the historians that we've talked about. Yes, they're Roman writers too, Arrian, Curtius, Diodoros, etc. But the later Roman writers who write about things in Alexander's career, they're not writing histories. And they do tend to focus, they were fascinated with the friendship between Alexander and Hephaestion. Okay. And that a king, and maybe this is thinking again about their own emperors, how unusual is it to have an emperor, a king, who has a real best friend, okay, and who is Alexander too. So one of the most popular stories in Roman writers about Alexander and Hephaestion is them before the Persian women. So after the Battle of Issus, they go in. They meet Sisygambis and Statira, the mother and wife of Darius and his family. And Sisygambis mistakes Hephaestion for Alexander because he's taller and supposedly better looking. And so she starts to go down in this proskynesis, this special bout, and Hephaestion says, "No, it's not me. That's Alexander." And one of her eunuchs is, saying this as well. And so she starts to rebow to Alexander, and Alexander says, "Never mind, mother. He too is Alexander." That's the one of the ways that the story is used. It's also sometimes used about how the fortune can, you know, you're on top of the world one day and the next you're the prisoner of the guy who beat your son. So there's different ways this tale is used. It's probably coming from Cleitarchus. Curtius is our kind of longest version of it, if you want to go read it. Arrian relates it as well, but Arrian says he's not entirely sure it happened. And he's probably right. It's a great story. It's a lovely story. But it appears possibly to have been invented. Nonetheless, the Romans loved it. Okay. Our Roman era writers loved it, and they tell it, and not just in our histories, but in these other sources as well. So it gets repeated a lot. So Hephaestion in Roman literature is presented as the friend. Okay, that's his role. And so maybe it's not too much of a surprise that that's how he gets emphasized today. But I'm back here saying, hey, hey, he was actually a general. And again, if you read the actual sources, you read Arrian, if you read Curtius, if you read Diodoros, not so much Plutarch. Plutarch's focused on Alexander the guy. And so if you were to read Plutarch, you would in fact not know that Hephaestion was chilliarch at the end. You wouldn't know most of his appointments, in fact, nor a lot of other people's. That's not Plutarch's interest, but it's very much present in Arrian and Curtius and Diodoros. So yeah, that is his role. He is the second man in the empire, Alexander's right-hand guy at the court. And again, his rivals are the other marshals and Krateros in particular.